Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Happy Cynics. And how's it going there, iDog?
It's going all right.
So how are the chickens? Are they laying eggs and doing everything they're supposed to do?
Yeah, they actually got a pretty major upgrade to the coop this week. I built them a new roost and got all of their overwinter heaters all set up, so they won't be cold at night.
Oh, okay. So, so I guess, So do you have, is the chicken coop insulated?
No, it's just a bare shed, basically.
Okay. So what kind of temperature you try to keep it at, like during the cold months?
Well,
in the 40s or something?
Chickens are pretty hardy. They can handle below freezing temperatures. What you want to avoid is below 0 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mm-hmm.
So I put 2 little heating panels out there that are safer than heating lights.
Okay.
Because chicken coops are famously full of hay and pine shavings. So any source of heat you have to be pretty careful with. And then the other thing you have to be careful about is having their water freeze. Mm-hmm. So they make water heaters for chicken coops. Okay. So I got all that set up this week.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
It's a pretty jank setup. I just have a really long, construction grade extension cord running from my house, 50 feet back all the way to my chicken coop. So,
well,
but it works. It worked last year anyway.
Oh, well, we end up having those extension cords when we put the Christmas lights out anyway. Almost have to. You just have to kind of keep the connections up off the ground in case you get snow and ice, and so it doesn't short out or something. But
yeah, my cable is laying just on bare ground, so it worked. It was fine last year.
Okay,
so I'm assuming it'll be fine this year.
Sometimes I'll just take and run some electrical tape around the connection to keep water.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Getting in there. Yeah, that works pretty well, actually. Well, anyway, today's topic, something I've been thinking about here, is the concept of etiquette and whether it's dying out or whether it needs to be revived or whatever. I mean, some people historically. So I was on the Emily Post website. Of course, Emily Post is long gone, but her family maintains a website and talking about etiquette. So basically, it was really interesting because the Emily Post family, they basically just talk about there's basically 3 underlying principles that drive etiquette. Respect, consideration, and honesty, which I think that captures it pretty well. I guess a lot of it has to do with in society today, are we getting to the point where there's not, let's say we're becoming less traditional. And with I guess the question is, how much have we relied on tradition to basically promote polite behavior between people, or whether people are willing to or can learn to be polite on their own and be considerate of others, or if that's something that needs to be taught. And then how do we teach these things? Do we just... Okay, any initial reactions here before I press into this a
I
little
only
bit?
learned about who Emily Post is because I had to plan a wedding.
Oh.
But before I got married, no idea. Who's Emily Post?
You never watched Three Stooges shorts? You ever watch Three Stooges shorts?
I've seen Three Stooges.
Okay, well...
Don't remember any Emily Post in there.
Well, there was a couple places where they're getting ready to eat something, and say Larry would take a big stalk of celery and he's getting ready to bite into it, and Mo says, "Hey, where's your Emily Post?" And then he would stick his pinkies up and then still take a huge bite of it anyway and crunch, and so there was a couple times where they would say, "Where's your Emily Post?" And then they would like stick their pinkies up in the air and then go ahead and still take like a huge mouthful or whatever. But you don't remember that, huh?
Yeah, not in what I've seen. But I also didn't grow up with the Three Stooges.
Well,
you don't have
them on DVD either. I've got like the whole set. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, you didn't know about Emily Post.
Not before I got married.
Okay. So what about etiquette? Like, is this like a thing of the past? Is it, does it intrigue you? Like what? I mean, there used to be like certain conventions, like how you were expected to, especially like, I don't know why, but like everybody like got so like worked up about like things you did at the dinner table. Like, I don't know if that's still the case. Do you ever get a feeling of that? Like with family or like at a family gathering or something, like at a holiday or something?
Well, so as a pastor's kid,
okay,
I learned etiquette because we would have, meetings and important dinners at our house.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of learned the do's and don'ts of politeness at the dinner table from some of those occasions. Being married to a non-pastor's kid, I've realized that I have a lot of different experiences that a lot of non-pastor's kids don't have. So I might be uniquely aware of those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, so some of this discussion, as I was kind of researching it, and I will say here, I want to get into, like, Reader's Digest has like I found Reader's Digest has a list of like 50 little etiquette rules. It says to navigate. 50 little etiquette rules you should always practice. And I want to kind of look at some of those and talk about, like, some of the older ones are kind of left off, and there's others, like some stuff, but it really has to do with like consideration of other people. Some things are pretty obvious, like some of the traditional ones. Don't talk with your mouth full. So like it really has to do with eating, because eating, I guess, ends up being, well, let's put it this way. Next to going to the bathroom, okay, eating is probably the next most disgusting thing that we do as far as biological functions. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way, but that's probably why there are so many. I mean, who wants to sit? I don't know if you've ever eaten with somebody who makes a lot of noise when they eat. And my wife says that I make a lot of noise, and I try not to. I mean, I really do. But I mean, it really is kind of disgusting. You hear people kind of going, making like little noises and stuff while they're chewing.
I had a roommate in college who was never told to chew with his mouth closed. So yeah,
that can be brutal. I mean, because nobody wants to see the chewed up food in somebody's mouth. Nobody wants to see that. So like some of these rules are just pretty obvious. It's just like, okay, cover your mouth and your nose, like when you have to sneeze or cough. Don't get up close to people whenever you're sick. I just had a student today email me and said, there was another student who come up and sat down right next to me, coughing and sneezing and stuff, and now I've got it. And it reminds me, my dad tells a story. So when my grandfather, in his last years, he was suffering from Alzheimer's. Well, as his Alzheimer's progressed, it hit the filter of, like, he like lost his filter for whatever he was thinking. He would just blurt it out loud. Well, Dad would have to take Mom for her chemo treatments, and then sometimes Grandma and Pap would ride along with them. Okay, well, this one time, they went along, and Mom was getting her chemo treatment. Grandma went with her, and then Dad sat with Pap, my grandfather. Well, somebody was there sitting on the other side of him and started coughing and never covered her mouth. And my grandfather said, "At least you could do is cover your mouth. I got my problems too." like you shouldn't even have to say that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of other things that I think, like, there are little niceties that it wouldn't be something like it would be terrible if you don't do, but it's really nice if you know to do them. There is one thing though, like some of these conventions, like it's interesting as a professor. Okay. I occasionally get an email from a student who just addresses me by first name. And like, I would have never thought of doing something like that. Addressing an elder or somebody I didn't know personally just by first name. It's just, you're just taught, Ms. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so or Dr. So-and-so. And that's another thing too. If somebody's a doctor, like I read an article that, this was probably a year or two ago, but some of this, what I'm talking about, this kind of breakdown of boundaries was also being experienced by a lot of physicians. Like people were increasingly just calling their doctor by first name. And like the question is, should there be a certain boundary? Okay, it's just like you get different opinions, and I'm not like a big stickler. I mean, there are some professors who are okay with their students calling them by first name, but you could see where, like, if you're a high school teacher, like allowing teenagers to call you by first name, there's the old expression, like familiarity breeds contempt. That ends up becoming more problematic. Now, I know other professors that they want their undergraduate students to address them formally, but then they want graduate students to be on a first name basis with them. It just kind of flabbergasts me. Like, who would go into your physician and just presume to call your physician by first name? Or even, like, would you go in and just call your doctor, Ms. or Mr. and not really even recognize the title? Because I get that too. That used to bother me when I got my PhD. 90% of my relatives would still send us Christmas card with Mr. on it. And it's like, it almost is it's kind of a very subtle way of saying, your PhD really isn't that important to me. I mean, am I being a little overly sensitive here?
Well, I think it kind of depends on the specific relationship in which those titles are being used.
Okay.
So, and maybe this will be a little bit too extreme for this conversation, but in a lot of like anarchist thought, and like not just like political anarchy, but like anarchist philosophy.
Okay.
There's this idea of unjustified hierarchy, and unjustified hierarchy is like the villain of anarchist philosophy. However, they do leave room for justified hierarchies in which the hierarchy is a non-exploitative relationship. So that's kind of the key idea. One of the most like poignant examples of hierarchical settings that one of my professors used when I was doing my sociology undergrad was the classroom. Mm-hmm. So
right.
A classroom cannot operate properly without a hierarchical relationship between professor and students.
Mm-hmm.
So the question would be, is the relationship between the professor and the students a justified hierarchy, or is it unjust? I think that's a more important question when it comes to etiquette, is like, oh, is this good or bad? But rather, like, that's not the question. The question is, can this be justified in some way as a proper title, or is it a title that's being used to exploit students?
All right, I agree with what you're saying. Okay, let me kind of qualify what I'm reacting to. Like, I'd rather get a card, and I don't care. Like, some of the relatives just simply put Kevin and Amy Lowry, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But if you're going to try to be formal in addressing the card, it's just like if you get a wedding invitation. If I got a wedding invitation, and now if somebody just puts Kevin and Amy Lowry, then that's fine. But if somebody refers to my wife as Mrs., okay, then I expect to be addressed as Doctor, not as Mr. I don't know. Everybody's not not that I feel offended necessarily. It's not like I feel insulted by being referred to as Mr., but it was an opportunity for somebody to just affirm me or show me a small amount of respect, or at least an appreciation of having that degree, and they don't do it. And again, it's not necessarily a thing where if you just get like something singular, like a graduation announcement or a wedding invitation, where it may be a one-time thing. We're talking about, like, people would like send you a Christmas card every year, and they would do the same exact thing every year, or like relatives that you actually were closer to. Now, if you're going to address people formally, it's just like, who would, okay, so you're talking about pastor's kid, okay? Who would, how would you interpret, say, like, if somebody just sent your parents something, Mr. and Mrs., knowing that your father's an ordained minister, if you're going to be formal, why would you not is it more difficult to put Reverend and Mrs. rather than Mr. and Mrs.?
My dad is actually the Reverend Dr. Dillman.
Yes.
Because he has his doctorate.
Yes.
So he never has used that title. Not once. He doesn't go by doctor. He doesn't go by Reverend. He only goes by Mr.
Really?
And I think part of that is that there is one of the things we're running into is, what does that title represent to the holder of the title? In my dad's case, he is not working in academia. He's mostly around people who have not been in the academic setting. And so for them, the title of doctor is merely in that setting, that would have been used pretty much exclusively just to draw a division between one who has a doctorate and one who does not. And it's not so much a sign of respect as it is a sign of, you belong to a world that I don't belong to. So he does not like the title.
Okay.
Because he doesn't want to put up that barrier. However, in an academic setting, he goes by doctor.
Okay.
He teaches as an adjunct professor at a couple different universities. So in that setting, he goes by doctor because there, the recognition of his status is it's fundamentally part of his relationship to students, right? He wouldn't have students if he was not doctor.
Well, and it qualifies him for the position.
Right, exactly. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, I get that. Maybe I'm being too tough. But just
for people who have, like, most working class people, if you're a tradesman and you've never been in an academic setting, the title doctor, you wouldn't even have a way of conceiving how that is appropriately used, right? Because you've never had to do that kind of work. Not that you've never put in hard work, but that academic work and the achievement of a PhD means nothing to someone who's never been in academia.
Yes, and it brings me exactly to my whole thesis here. And that is, do we need to revive some sort of social etiquette so that people are aware of how the way they address and react to other people, how that gets interpreted by other people? I don't think, like I say, I don't take it as an insult that somebody's intentionally insulting me, that should know better. It's just that, like I say, a lot of it, I think, also is driven by, the fact that, so in my mind, the question is, do we need to have etiquette? Does it need to be revived? Because, okay, like some of the research I did, like it tried to define what's the difference between etiquette and manners. Well, etiquette, from what I gather, from what I read, and I think this makes sense to me, manners is a broader term of just how we act towards others, how ways in which our actions reflect our attitudes toward others. So whether somebody has good manners or bad manners, like if you're acting in a good manner or acting in a bad manner, like your actions kind of indicate how much how you feel about the person, whether you love and respect the person, or whether you're kind of indifferent, or whether you have some kind of antipathy against the person. All right. Well, then etiquette is about like a set of social norms or customs that everybody is encouraged to uphold in order to try to promote good manners. So somebody can have good manners without knowing anything about etiquette. But etiquette can serve as a guide for people who don't know how to, they may have a good attitude, but they don't know how to express that in a way that attitude's going to be effectively communicated to others. So, in other words, I think when a student sends me an email, okay, and addresses me by first name, I don't interpret that as a deliberate sign of disrespect. I would only interpret that if I ask them, would you please address me as professor or doctor, in the context of being a part of this class, and then they refuse to honor that, then I might interpret that as a sign of disrespect. But somebody doesn't necessarily, in other words, a lack of etiquette doesn't necessarily express a lack of respect. But the question is, do we need etiquette where somebody thinks or kind of helps people to understand certain behaviors that tend to be interpreted in a different way, or at least certain behaviors are conducive to showing consideration and respect for other people? So, and anytime you want to jump in here, so I don't know. I guess the question is, do we need some sort of guidance again on teaching people how to be considerate of other people? Or, because I used to think, well, these are just kind of old-fashioned things that are no longer needed because people can just interact and get to know people. But I'm not so sure. I don't know. How much reading have you ever done in Thomas Hobbes and the Leviathan? Well, you're familiar with this, right?
Yeah, pretty familiar. Okay. I know what it says.
Well, my impression of Hobbes has always been he basically doesn't portray human beings as being mean-spirited or hateful or anything like that. but he does believe that human beings are just naturally selfish, not in the sense that we don't care about other people, but the fact that we tend to be so preoccupied with our own desires and wants and our own happiness. Like I've tried to illustrate this way. I think Hobbes had the view that the average person is like a bull in a china shop. We just go after the things that we want to pursue, and we don't really pay attention to how our behavior is impacting other people. And I've sometimes wondered, in more recent years with like the breakdown of some of these, like as we become less and less traditional, I would think that the traditions aren't necessary for people to show respect to one another. But I really think there's a lot of people that even though they want to be respectful, they don't know how.
So here's what I will chime in with. And I'll try to pose this as a question, but it is also pushing back on what you're trying to say here.
Sure.
Do you think that the term etiquette has become sort of anathema to the actual practice of etiquette in society? So what I mean by that is that from my observations, it's not that etiquette has died, but that etiquette has been reborn with new rules.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
And to call it etiquette is against the rules.
Well, that does make sense in this. Okay, so this is something I failed to mention. In the history of etiquette and rules, I mean, you had like medieval chivalry, and you had like different periods of time had like different practices and such things that you did or didn't do, like ways to greet people. So like going back even to the Roman Empire, okay, this is where the handshakes developed. Of course, I think in the Roman Empire, maybe in ancient Roman Greece, they actually grasped each other's forearms. They didn't like shake hands. But the idea was, the reason that they grasped forearms as a sign of friendship was, I'm not going to pull my sword on you. Okay, I'm not armed and I don't have any hostile intentions. Well, then this also led to things like salutes and even waving goodbye and putting the hand up, showing peace. It's like you're not picking up an arm or you're not making a fist. Like even like the symbol for Jainism, you have the palm, like the open palm, and that's non-harm. Like, so in other words, even like our practices of waving to people or saluting and things like that are all tied to this kind of, and that's why they're typically all done by the right hand, because the vast majority of people were right-handed. So the gesture was done with the right hand to show I'm not pulling a weapon. I have no animus. I come as a friend. Okay. And so forth and so forth. The Victorian era is where etiquette kind of got run in the ground. Like Victorian society, from what I read, like etiquette kind of got hijacked by people who wanted to feel aristocratic. And so, and one of the people that it was even before, like it was even outside of England, who kind of pushed this was Louis XIV of France. Supposedly, Louis XIV would throw these dinner parties with invited guests, but then he dictated like that everything had to be done a certain way. Like how people would like greet one another and how they would take their seats and when everybody would start eating and all this sort of thing. And so this kind of approach got adopted by Victorian society, where you showed that you were a person of nobility or you were a genteel person, a person of refinement and sophistication. So you end up having these finishing schools. So a finishing school is one where you're taught all this etiquette. And so you know all the right ways to do things. And that shows that you are a superior person to other people. I don't want to advocate anything like that. And I don't want anything to do with that. But I think you may be right. Maybe the term etiquette carries too much of that kind of a connotation that, hey, I'm a better person than you because, I don't eat with my elbows on the table. Of course, that's one that I think probably had a practical use in the past, maybe when people had dirty elbows or something. But I don't know that's such a big deal anymore. But certainly some things aren't going to change, like, eating with your mouth closed and not talking with your mouth full and those kinds of things, or not interrupting people while they're speaking. So go ahead.
I'm going to interrupt you while you're speaking.
Oh, well, I didn't mean to. I wasn't throwing that out there for that. I knew that was what was going to happen as soon as I said that. So
you gave me too much of an opportunity there. So back to your definition, though, of etiquette as sort of kind of a way to show respect or deference to the other.
Mm-hmm.
I want to push back on that.
All right.
And say that those who have our utmost respect, that we are closest with, that we really love, we do not use the rules of etiquette for.
Really?
That when we become more intimate with a person who we truly love,
well,
the rules of engagement are no longer necessary to kind of referee that relationship. So
for the most part, I mean, just because you're married doesn't mean your spouse is going to not mind if you eat with your mouth open.
Sure. But when it comes to like the broader relationship,
yes,
of being intentionally rude to someone can be a sign of affection and intimacy that you are now comfortable with them.
Yeah, teasing people
to the point of being straight up rude.
Yeah.
And that here's the other thing I want to say is that like true engagement in an argument where differences are being displayed, which I think is the like deepest form of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
Those rules of engagement have been abandoned at that point.
Well, okay, so all right, I'll grant. Okay, so I take that point, but maybe etiquette is not really about those with whom we are the closest.
Yeah,
so etiquette has to do with people with whom we're not close, and they don't respect proper boundaries.
Yeah, so what I'm proposing is alternatively considering etiquette as the public rules of engagement.
Okay.
So all public life is
militaristic.
I think that it's intentional. That it's kind of the Geneva Convention of public difference. Right? So we can be different. We can have our differences. We were talking when we were talking about infrastructure, that third place.
Yeah.
That is the proper sphere for etiquette.
Right.
Right. Because then you have what's his name? He got his own Frasier. You have Frasier talking to the country bumpkin.
Right.
But what they have in common is those rules of engagement, that they don't relate to each other outside of that etiquette rules that sort of referee that relationship. So where this takes me is to look into the history of etiquette as sort of a secular extension of purity rituals. That's where I would kind of take this, that purity rituals in ancient religions generally are relevant in the public sphere and not at home. Right? So you can be impure in a religious way in the public sphere, that like you wouldn't interact with someone who's impure, but that doesn't mean that they are like morally shameful in their private settings.
Right.
So that the purity ritual sort of is that like rules of engagement. Like you cannot be part of society if you are impure, even though that doesn't necessarily affect your like level of relationship at a more intimate level.
Okay, I agree. I agree that etiquette can become that and sometimes is. But I'm talking about etiquette more just in the sense of being polite to people. I don't necessarily buy into the notion that somehow being polite is like should be some kind of like special status. I would just hope that living in a civil society that we just try to be polite to people. There should be some kind of a modicum of like a baseline of consideration that each person's given. It's just like, okay, the person who goes out of turn at a 4-way stop sign. The person who won't wait their turn. They're just being inconsiderate to everybody else.
Sure. And I'll illustrate my point with a more like recent example that's not like ancient culture.
Okay.
To my generation, or let's say somebody who's woke-minded,
all right,
etiquette takes the form of not using slurs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there's a long list of words you don't use
right.
as part of etiquette.
Right.
However, the people generally younger who abide by those terms do not also abide by the more conservative version of etiquette of respecting your elders or, not cursing or, and so on and so on. And so it becomes a sort of signifier publicly as to if you are pure or impure to a certain group or certain political mindset, what version of etiquette you are abiding by.
Okay. So I'm not sure how to respond to that. Could you restate it one more time? Just so I'm not misunderstanding what I think you're saying.
If you say the F word in public,
right,
it might signify to your peers in that setting,
right,
that you are laid back about really formal etiquette rules. And you're more relatable, you're approachable, and you don't take yourself too seriously. All of which are highly valued by, in my experience, younger people. And this is expressed in multiples of ways, like how they dress, which is another form of etiquette. Like all of that is very like Zoomer mindset. However, if you say the R word, which we won't.
Yeah.
If you say the R word, that's a sign that like, oh, you come from a different time and you might be well dressed, well put together. You don't curse in public. But you use this word to describe other people. That's also a signifier that you belong to a different group. Right? And you might be offended by the F word, but you're not offended by the R word.
Yeah. At some point, I do want to come in. I want to get down this little list and just see what you think about this list. Because I do think what you're saying. Okay, so there is an aspect of this I want to maybe come back to. Yeah, I don't know. Like the one part of etiquette has to do with, So like when we talk about boundaries and say like, say personal space, or say like, what do they call that? Not just like personal space, but like these zones of, friendship, or I can't remember what I can't remember what the term is, but like, how you have these
like
circles.
Zones of intimacy.
Yes. I think that may be it. But like these
circles of trust.
Yeah. There is that part where, I do suspect that it does seem to me that some of the younger generations do not seem to value that as much as the older generations. But they think that because they don't care about that we shouldn't care either. I mean, to me, would be the equivalent of, say, if I made a trip to the Middle East or China or Japan, some place where the customs are different, like you don't make direct eye contact with people or whatever. Like if I just kind of ignore that and insist, walk up, make eye contact and stick my hand out or whatever, like ignoring their customs, would they be wrong to say that that's a lack of respect? I really don't think so. I realize there's limits to this. Like, I don't think that everybody ought to be obligated to, have to do everything a certain way. And unless you do it exactly this way, it's not acceptable or whatever. I don't buy into that. But whenever somebody doesn't like even kind of do like very minimal things, it's just very difficult for me to view that person other than just somebody who's selfish. Or let's put it this way, apathetic toward the feelings of others. Or lack of sympathy or something. Or maybe thinking because this is silly because I think that your sensitivities are silly, that I really shouldn't have to worry. I don't really have any obligation to honor them at all.
Sure. I think even that, though, can become a sort of like othering in terms of what values you are representing. So, for instance, there are some who, you were talking about Japan,
right.
A culture with very different terms of etiquette and respect that are very important for that culture.
Right.
In Japan, there is like a whole cultural spirit around the wearing of certain garments.
Right.
And Westerners who go to Japan in Japanese culture are encouraged to partake in the wearing of kimono and doing the traditional makeup and all of that sort of thing.
Right.
In the West, when people participate who are not Japanese, that is extremely frowned upon as cultural appropriation.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't belong to that culture. And so it is one of the things that like the younger generation is like sees as an inherent value is authenticity. So if something comes from a culture, it needs to be authentically from that culture. Now, what authenticity means is very subjective and changes a lot. So when somebody from the West goes to Japan, participates in the kimono rituals, that is seen as inauthentic. Even though it's done out of respect for the culture, it is still condemned by people for whom authenticity means some sort of like ethnic purity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and I disagree with this like purity mindset on either side.
Yeah.
But that can be construed as an etiquette issue.
Yeah.
At the extremes. And I don't disagree that like rules of engagement are important, but it kind of comes down to what is the foundational value. And if we meet somebody whose foundational values are different, are we using etiquette to other them and make them hateable, dehumanized?
This reminds me of the Seinfeld episode. I don't know if you ever saw the Seinfeld episode where Elaine was getting her nails done, manicures at this place where Korean ladies worked, and then they would always like talk to each other in Korean and giggle. and she suspected that they were making fun of her. And well, then George's father, Frank, he had served in the army during the Korean War. And so he understood Korean. So she took him along, and then he listened, and they were making fun of her, and they even made fun of him. And then he responded and answered them in Korean. And then they got all mad and everything. Well, then here, the one lady who worked there, she was actually some gal that he had fallen in love with when he was in Korea. But then when she took him to meet her family, he refused to remove his shoes because he had bad foot odor and was embarrassed by his bad foot odor. And then he couldn't understand why they couldn't accept him without him removing his shoes. And they were saying it was disrespectful. And so they had this episode, where, the whole thing about, should you be expected to remove your shoes out of deference to the family, the setting you're in, and the family and their customs. And it was humorous, but it actually raised a bit of a question there. So anyway, I think all the stuff you're making, they're all good points. I mean, I don't, you've got me rethinking some of this. I mean, you really do. I still wish there was a little more. Maybe the word I want would be more appropriate to use instead of etiquette might be social awareness. Do you like that term? Because that would be maybe what I would say. Social awareness, or say personal empathy or something of that sort.
Okay, so expand on that, because when I hear personal empathy in terms of etiquette, my question is, how do you know how to be empathetic in a public square? Well,
this is where etiquette can serve as a guide to at least keep you from making, in other words, unintentionally offending somebody or making them extremely uncomfortable. I think etiquette should never be raised to the level where people feel insulted if it's not being followed. I think etiquette should be something that if people observe it, it's kind of like icing on the cake. It's nice when people do it. It's like, I don't feel insulted if somebody doesn't stop and hold the door for me. But I do feel that it's a very nice gesture when somebody does hold the door for me. See? So it's not necessarily something that has to be done, but it's just nice to do. And how about if I read through some of these? Because I think some of these will be kind of interesting. So just kind of stop me on one you want to, if there's one you want to talk about, because there's 50 of these. Okay. All right. Number 1, wait to eat until everyone is seated and served. All right. Number 2, put your napkin next to your plate, not on it. That's just basically like being considerate of the servers, because if you put your napkin on top of your plate, you make a big mess. So try not to leave a big mess for the person who has to clean up after you. Shield your lemon when squeezing. Again, you don't want to squirt on somebody else. Pass food to the right. Well, that could I would just say, just make sure everybody has access to everything.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you. I want to talk about the first two.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so wait to eat until everyone has been seated.
Yeah.
There is a rule that if you are around my family, you know this rule, but if you've never been around my family, you might not know this rule, that you wait, if it's somebody's birthday party and the cake has been served,
right?
You wait until the host or the birthday person has started eating their cake before you take your first bite. So the host or the person of honor always takes the first bite.
Yes.
There's no real reason for this.
Well, yeah, it's considerate. So my first year of seminary was in Mississippi. Well, the president and the president of the seminary and his wife, they were both Southerners, and so like I learned a little bit about some of the Southern, etiquette. That was one of the things there is like the hostess takes the first bite, and then everybody else can eat. It really is that. I think a lot of that has to do with that way you don't relegate the person who's hosting to like the position of a servant where they have to eat after everybody else is finished. Everybody can wait. I mean, there are exceptions. Like we'll go to a restaurant and, it's interesting because the restaurants will try to honor this to a certain extent by bringing everybody's food at the same time. Like, right. So if you're in a group of people, don't order the thing that takes the least amount of time to fix, or your food's going to be sitting there waiting for the rest of the food to be being prepared before they're going to bring it out to you. But of course, don't order something that takes a lot longer to fix than everybody else's, because then everybody has to wait on you. I don't know. How far do you go with some of these things? That certainly is debatable.
So when it comes to the don't eat until everyone has been served,
right?
The pushback that I think would be against that is the empathetic feeling towards somebody who does not know that rule, or who might be, let's say, they're food insecure, and so they have that mindset of like, I just got to get what I can get, and eat it all. Because I don't know where my next meal is going to come from.
Or there are people that suffer from like blood sugar issues too, and like they may need to get something in their system.
And you never know. You never know what somebody's reason is for disrespecting etiquette.
Right.
So from a different perspective, I don't want to say my perspective or my generation's perspective, but a different perspective would be, you just don't have conflict in that scenario because you don't want someone to feel shame for something that they did not know. And so that's another level of empathy, but it's not necessarily better or worse than empathy for the host.
Right.
It's just different.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in those situations too, where somebody starts eating before the host or hostess sits down or whatever. Well, then I'll go ahead and probably start taking a bite or two also, so that the person who breached the protocol doesn't feel like a goofball or like, the leper.
I think that is etiquette, but it's all unspoken.
Right.
It's all you just know.
Well, it's just a matter of being considerate of other people's feelings. I would hope, and like I said, I really would like to think that people can just learn to be considerate without etiquette. But sometimes, let's put it this way, with multiculturalism, I mean, that's one of the things that makes kind of life interesting. I think rather, when we celebrate our differences with other people and we learn to appreciate the things more than one way, I don't think, if Japanese people move to the United States and they still want to take their shoes off, come into the house, or like to sit down, eat a meal or whatever, they shouldn't have to feel any pressure to give that up if they don't really want to. It's just like families have their own like holiday customs and things like that, and I don't think anybody should be pressured in or out of those sorts of things. It's just like there is something to be gained just by understanding why people do things the way they do, and just trying to show some consideration for the feelings of other people. That's really the bottom line. Again, there's nothing sacred about me getting an envelope with doctor in front of my name, honestly. And there's nothing harmful with me getting a letter or card that addresses me as Mr. either. It really comes down to, is the person disrespecting me or respecting me or neither or whatever, most of the time it's really not important enough to ever bring up or make an issue of it.
Well, now that I've played devil's advocate in one direction, I want to play it in the other way.
All right, go ahead.
In cultures where etiquette is more universal and it's taught from a very young age so that everyone knows all of the rules, people have much less anxiety about their place in the public sector of life because they know this is where I stand in society. You know, in Japan, there's much less crime because everyone has ingrained in them these certain rules of suspect from a very young age that school children know that they are always going to be deferential to their elders.
Right.
And because of this, you don't have to worry about how to act in public. You don't have to worry about being empathetic to every single person in the room and considering everybody's perspective constantly.
Right.
Because everybody has these clear rules of engagement.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
On the other hand, we live in a society where you have to be anxious constantly about how other people feel and how they might react to you because we don't know how to engage clearly with each other in the public sector.
And see, that's what makes it awkward. Now, I know like in some places in Europe, like the professors would even address the students formally too. So like instead of just referring to students by first name, you would say Mr. So-and-so or Ms. So-and-so, and call one of them class. And maybe we need to have some of that in the United States. Maybe, I mean, that's another way of like establishing a hierarchy in the classroom is that, okay, professors address students by first name, but students, it's unacceptable for you to address the professor by first name. See? And that's one way of establishing and maintaining a hierarchy, which, yeah, practically speaking, in terms of keeping a classroom running smoothly, you somewhat pretty much need. Or, you got that anarchy thing going again.
Well, it could be an interesting educational tool to address students by titles if you expect them to do professional work and operate in a professional way. You dress for the job you want, treat your students as the students you want them to be.
Well, yeah.
There's something to be said for that. I think that's down to the individual classroom, probably.
I wonder how my students would respond if I started like addressing them formally. The only thing I would be afraid of is like, I don't think the students would enjoy the experience as much because they wouldn't feel as connected to me as their professor. I don't know.
Run an experiment on your students.
Yeah, I could do that. Maybe a little group, even a group that I've already been using their first names. If I just do it for a while and see just how it changes the dynamics or to what extent they like it or dislike it.
Yeah, like the Stanford prison experiment, but different.
Yeah, right. A role play. 14, avoid voicemails or make them brief. It was basically saying instead of leaving a voicemail for somebody, just send them a text if you can't get through to them in a phone call.
Can I add one to this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't add people to group chats over text message unless you expect the conversation to be relevant to every person in the group.
Yeah.
Like, don't just like, oh, well, I wanted to send this picture to all of these people, so I just put them all in a group chat. No, send the picture to each individual person.
Oh, okay.
The only time a group chat is appropriate is if you're like,
it's a group discussion.
I need you to all send me the dates for this project we're working on.
Right.
Like that, then it's appropriate to be in a group chat. But if you just want to send one thing to multiple people, send it to individual text chains. I hate being in group chats where like, cool picture. Like, I don't care.
Yes.
Keep me out of this. I don't need the notifications.
I've gotten that too. It's like, oh, yeah. So, yeah. I at one point I had to ask to be left out of the happy birthday text messages because it just gets overwhelming. Like all the responses coming back. I mean, I just want to say happy birthday and be done, and maybe a response or two and be done with it, instead of, listen to all 20 people chime in.
It's ridiculous.
Number 15, don't say yes when you mean no. Number 16, respond.
Yeah, don't be a liar.
Yeah, don't be a liar. Well, this was saying about like committing to things. Like when somebody asks you to do something, if you don't really want to do it, just be honest and say, no, I really don't want to. Number 29, and this one I wasn't sure about either. Don't request cash for gifts or post your Venmo. I get the Venmo, but don't ask for cash. And it was like, say, don't rob people. If people want to pick out a gift for you, let them be able to pick out a gift for you.
Sure, yeah. I understand that. But also, sometimes you don't have anything else to put on your wedding registry, and you just want cash.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I have that. Yeah.
Well, there's something to be said there, though, that money doesn't have any value except for how it can be purchased, how it can be used to purchase commodities. And so money as a gift isn't. There's something there that's a little deeper. We could unpack, but I don't know if we want to do that here.
Yeah, that might be a spillover discussion in another day, another topic. But that's an interesting point. Okay, well, I'm up to 30 out of 50. 30.
Yeah, gift cards are the worst, though.
Really? I like gift cards.
I like. Oh man!
I think when you get older, you appreciate money and gift cards because you get into. Well, let's put it this way: when I was your age, I didn't have the disposable income just to buy things whenever I wanted them. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Okay, I just sent two orders into Traeger. That's the pellet smoker grill that I have.
Yeah,
because for Thanksgiving, we're going to do 2 smaller turkeys. We're going to do one the conventional way with stuffing in the roaster, and I'm going to spatchcock smoke a turkey on the smoker. And so I bought special turkey, seasoned pellets, and I bought a wide spatula thing to be able to lift and manipulate and flip over the turkey and things like that. But when I was younger, I didn't have the money for that, so it would go on a wish list. And then, somebody might get it for me for a birthday or Christmas or something.
Okay, I concede your point. Gift cards are a great gift if they're solicited beforehand.
Well, okay, yes. A gift card is not a good excuse for not putting thought into somebody's gift. I get that.
There are certain stores that I don't want a gift card to.
Yeah.
But if it's I like to...
Amazon, they sell everything.
Yeah, I mean, that you might as well just give cash at that point, right? But if it's I want you to spend this money on yourself on this hobby that you have, and so I got you a gift card for a specific store that sells your hobby supplies.
Yes.
That is a good gift. Yeah, because you might not know the specific thing that they need to do this task.
I've done that. I give somebody Cabela's or or the what's that one with the fishing and hunting that's up north?
Duluth?
Oh no. It's like fishing and hunting supplies.
A Bass Pro Shop?
Yeah, that's it. Bass Pro Shops.
I love Bass Pro Shops.
Yeah, I've given gift cards to that
Sure, but a Target gift card?
Yeah, I get it.
No.
Unless that's their favorite place to shop and they like just buying stuff at Target.
Maybe you should take them to a better store.
All right. For all of you Target fans, you can direct your emails to Isaac.
Come at me. Let's go shopping together. I'll take you to better stores. I shop at Target all the time. I just don't want a gift card there.
Well, okay. I get it. Did they let you use it for the Starbucks coffee?
I don't know. I've never tried.
That's a good question.
Can you use a Starbucks gift card in a Target Starbucks, or can you use a Target gift card in a Target Starbucks? Are they interchangeable?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Because I know that, like, in some of these like venues, they're not actually Starbucks stores.
Right, it's a Target-run store.
Right.
It's just branded as Starbucks.
It's just like Target has a coffee shop that's authorized to offer Starbucks coffee in a format that resembles Starbucks stores.
You ever notice that across the street from every Target is a real Starbucks?
That is interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but there is one here.
There's one where you live. There's one where I live. Literally right in front of Target is another Starbucks.
Really? I wonder if that's intentional.
I had a roommate.
On part of Starbucks.
Who worked at Starbucks, and they used to just talk trash about the Target Starbucks all the time.
Oh,
not real Starbucks employees.
Oh,
what a funny feud.
Well, you know whenever you can't tip, so it's not a real Starbucks employee. So
yeah, I bet you that is a good way to like.
It is the way.
Can you tip at a Target Starbucks?
No, you can't. But
you can tip at a normal Starbucks because I used to do that.
Yes, you can. In fact, the app will often solicit you. Do you want to leave a tip? And but like Meijer has a Starbucks in it too, and it's the same way. You can't tip there, or even the one that's on campus at where I teach. The campus Starbucks is actually owned by Sodexo.
Oh, right.
Right. And so you don't tip there either because they're Sodexo employees. They're not Starbucks employees.
So this is totally
off topic. It's Sodexo employees masquerading as Starbucks
they have
employees.
The aprons and everything,
yes,
but they're not. Yeah. So I used to, when I lived with this guy who worked at Starbucks, he's a good friend of mine, he used to give us free drinks anytime we went in.
Wow.
So we went a lot. So I was working at Jimmy John's at the time.
And how long did it take for him to get fired? No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
He worked at Starbucks for years, actually. He made good. They treat their employees pretty well, for the most part. I know they have some issues, but so I worked at Jimmy John's at the time.
Yeah.
And so whenever I could, I used to just steal Jimmy John's food and bring it to the Starbucks employees for free because they would give me my drinks for free.
Golly. Like the Robin Hoods of fast food or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's class solidarity. So I'm curious. I have my own little list of rules that I find really fascinaning, and they're exclusive to the male experience. So really? I'm curious if you've been aware of these.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I think they're an interesting example of if somebody unknowingly breaks the rules of etiquette, they immediately become even minor rules of etiquette. They can immediately become eligible as victims.
Oh,
right. Oh, it's okay to do violence now because they've done this thing. That's a big no-no.
Oh, okay.
If you are in the restroom and you see there are 5 urinals in the restroom,
yeah,
and the one on the far left and the one in the middle are occupied, which urinal do you choose?
They actually had years ago. There was like a little computer game they had. It was like a little
I've
quiz.
played this game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
which you cannot. There's only one option. You take the far right urinal.
Well, you take the one with the most distance. So you try to you try to protect people's privacy as much as possible.
Now, have you ever been in a bathroom situation where somebody comes up and there's a urinal that's one urinal separated, and yet the person chooses the urinal in between you two?
Yeah.
so that you're all shoulder to shoulder. Well, what does that make you want? You want to just like beat that guy up, right?
Well, yeah. Well, you can't. It's just like everything stops. You tense up, and then you can't do anything.
I'll tell you what's a sign like, oh, you don't know.
I'll tell you one. Okay, you're in a men's room. Okay, with several urinals and only one toilet. And some clown goes in and takes up the toilet, and you hear him stand there urinating in the toilet.
Oh, yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah, why are you?
There are people who need that specific stall.
Right. Well, I've even seen situations where you go in, there's only one toilet, and then somebody's in the stall, but they're not even sitting on the toilet. And it's like, okay, what are you? I don't want to know what you're doing in there, but why are you monopolizing this one seat? It's like, there's some buildings like that are old buildings where, like, I don't know how many males could possibly be in the building at a time, or females, but there's only maybe like 2 toilets for the men and 2 toilets for the women. Like one on each of 2 of 4 floors. Mm-hmm. And it's like, why would people it's just so inconsiderate. Or I go in and I've got to really use the toilet, and then there's some clown sitting in there fooling on his phone. And, my grandfather used to have an expression when people were messing around. He'd say, "Poop or get off the pot." But, literally, you feel like, but etiquette. I don't know.
For me, the experience was always, you're in an office building where a lot of your coworkers, and maybe it's an academic building where everybody has limited amounts of time between classes to use the bathroom, and everyone tends to be in there at similar times, and you're standing at a urinal, using it, trying to get out of the way, and people are talking to you.
Yes.
It's like, I know we all know each other. We're all friends here, but not here. I don't know you.
It's not a good time for a conversation. Yeah.
Don't acknowledge that I'm here with you while I am trying to use the restroom. Well, it's weird.
I'll tell you okay. So I'll tell you where it's really difficult is like if you go to, have you ever been to Wrigley Field?
No,
in Chicago?
Not for a baseball game.
Okay. So, they have renovated the bathrooms, but like, it's one of these where they don't even have like separate urinals. It's like
a trough.
Yeah, it's like mm-hmm. about a 20-foot bathtub, and then everybody just standing there using the same one. It's like,
sure,
man, talk about pressure. I mean, when you get older, I mean, it just like takes longer for everything, and it's so self-conscious, and it's like there's some guys that they're having trouble, and then they just act like they're done and pull. And then just leave anyway.
Just give up.
Yeah, they're back out there like a half inning later or whatever, I guess. I don't know.
You got to go in the middle of the inning so that nobody's in there.
Yeah. That's what you got to do. Bathrooms are so awkward sometimes for knowing, it's like if you're in a bathroom, that all depends. Like if you're in a bathroom and, you use a urinal and you pass gas, do you feel obligated to say, "Excuse me," or is that just kind of like an accepted?
You don't have to acknowledge anything in the bathroom. That's where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I know, but sometimes
that's what it's for.
But sometimes it depends on like how loud it is. Like if you, or if it smells really bad.
If it's really loud, do you say congratulations? This podcast has devolved.
I know, but truthfully, the kitchen and the bathroom, like these are the places where accidents happen too. I wonder if that's coincidental because it's like that's the place where we're like worried about etiquette the most. But anyway, we could go on and on. It's really
so.
Go ahead.
Yeah, back to the question at hand: is do we need more etiquette?
I don't know. I think so, but I'm not really sure.
I think we have plenty of etiquette. I think it just there's like this conflict between who's in charge of the etiquette when.
Yeah.
So I think after mulling over this issue, my conclusion is that etiquette is good. It relieves anxiety. It allows people to relate to each other.
Right.
it allows people to know when to apologize and when they've done nothing wrong. Like there's all these like benefits to having clearly articulated etiquette. Our problem is that we don't articulate the etiquette, and that our etiquette needs to be articulated in each individual scenario.
Oh my.
So for the classroom, you need to just lay out, like, that should be part of your syllabus. Here's your classroom etiquette.
Oh my. Wow. Okay.
Because we can't agree society wide anymore.
Okay,
but we could agree in a classroom.
Okay, I will say this. I mean, there are, like, for online courses, there are like rules of etiquette for how to participate on a discussion board. Okay, and even like outside of a classroom. So like, if you go to like some sports page, like for a team, and they'll have like a message board where people can comment on the game or have like a live thread as the game's, like University of Maryland basketball. They have testudo times or something like that. But there's people get on there, and then they'll be like posting on the board, but they have to have rules of etiquette, because then it's like everybody's going to have a certain sense of decorum about what's proper, what's not proper. And you can, like, they'll criticize each other, but it's only allowed to go to a certain point before the website administrators step in and boot somebody off and then delete their posts.
Sure.
And
and here's
with Donald Trump
part
running
of
for president again, I'm sure we're going to get back into that again with like social media etiquette. But anyway,
but like certain etiquette things in the classroom, because I think that's a relatable example, is like in a classroom of 100 students, you might need to raise your hand before you speak. In a classroom of 5 to 10, it becomes less necessary.
Sure, absolutely.
So that's why it kind of needs to be individual to the scenario.
Well,
and that might not be intuitive to certain students.
Well, sure, the setting. And there's a difference even like, say like a group in a classroom versus the same size group, like eating dinner together. See?
Right. Yeah.
So like, in a classroom, you could take the same group of people and it would be considered rude to interrupt somebody while they're talking. But like at the dinner table, that might be accepted more because it's just more informal conversation. And as long as you're not really being too, oppressive to somebody else and giving them a chance to speak,
Yeah. So my diagnosis is that I think we're too afraid of conflict to articulate what our expectations are in social settings. And I think all it takes is one person to take the lead. Yeah,
I think you're right. Maybe we need, Emily Post family or, others. I don't know. I don't know who it would be, but that's a good question. But I think you're right about the norms. Having some norms, it's not that everybody should feel like they're, written with the finger of God or something like that. Like, it's not like, you're going to be, get your ears boxed or get horsewhipped if you don't follow these things. But there at least should be like a set of, these would be kind of baseline expectations of, or let's just say ways of showing respect to other people. And then that way you kind of get away from some of this individual, different people getting set off by different things. It does kind of help to mediate that, because maybe that's part of our problem. Maybe the part of our problem is with the decline of etiquette, we've ended up with now everybody having all these different triggers and getting all upset about different things because we don't have any kind of commonly accepted parameters on what's considered polite conversation.
Sure. And part of what I'm saying is that all we need to do is just be more open.
Yeah, exactly.
And communicate.
Exactly.
Like, you just have to come up front with it and say like, hey, if in this classroom, if we could just like not talk about this particular thing, because that for me is sensitive.
That's true.
We got to,
except
when we don't do that, when we don't do that up front, then we get people who are rude unintentionally, which
Right.
I think is okay for people to unintentionally make faux pas.
Right.
But then they feel shame about it, and there's all this sort of like, oh, well, they should feel bad.
I agree.
The dynamic of the relationship is ruined just because we're not upfront.
We need to be upfront. The only thing I would add to that for nuance would be, though, people who don't feel the same way should at least be given some consideration. Like, here's the point. Everybody's feelings should be taken into consideration, but I've also been in these situations where everything kind of goes down to like lowest common denominator. So like you can only talk, like whoever's the most offended by everything basically sets all the standards for everybody. So you can't say anything about this because like we're not allowed talking about religion or politics here because that offends so-and-so. Well, at some point there's got to be a little bit of give and take where if you have differences of opinion on some of these things, well, then there has to be like some level of compromise where, okay, person A isn't getting to talk about everything they'd like to talk about, but person B is having to hear some conversation, a little bit of conversation that they're uncomfortable with, but it would still be kind of minimized. So you're staying away from the most painful things or whatever.
The goal of etiquette can't be to erase all conflict.
Yes, right, exactly, right. So it's really about showing deference and respect to the other person's feelings. And as long as we're willing to do that all the way around, most of the time we'll be able to find some kind of common ground that we can all agree on and feel comfortable with. And most of this stuff, some of it applies to person-to-person relationships. Some of it's group setting related, but like the bigger the group, then the more sensitive the whole thing becomes and maybe a little more restrictive. But then in more private settings, then some of these boundaries can maybe be relaxed a little bit to allow people a little more individual freedom of expression. On the other hand, there are some issues that people are going to have strong disagreements on, okay, where the only possible way to handle it is to just agree to some kind of a compromise. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have a very polite and and enjoyable day. And we hope
this will probably come out right before Thanksgiving. So.
Yeah, we hope you able to count your blessings and enjoy your time with family and friends, and enjoy your health. Let's all enjoy our health while we have it, and again, try to be a blessing to others along the way. Take care. God bless, and we'll talk to you and see you soon.